Her GoPro was still recording when rescuers found her body at 27,200 feet, and what it captured in the final 38 minutes made veteran Sherpas go completely silent. 2 experienced guides had warned her 3 separate times that morning, looked her in the eye, and told her she was not coming back down alive. So, why did she keep climbing anyway? When rescuers finally reached Jordan Kessler's body on the southeast ridge of Mount Everest, her GoPro camera was still attached to her chest harness. The battery had died only 11 minutes before the rescue team arrived. What the footage showed in those final 38 minutes was later reviewed by the Himalayan Rescue Association and quietly shared among senior expedition leaders across Nepal. None of them talked about it publicly for a long time. One Sherpa guide who watched the footage sat in silence for a full minute afterward, then said only, "She knew. In the end, she knew." To understand how Jordan Kessler ended up alone on the world's highest mountain in a whiteout at 27,200 feet, we need to go back to the first week of May 2019, when she arrived at Everest Base Camp with 2.4 million Instagram followers, a GoPro mounted to everything she owned, and absolutely no idea what she had gotten herself into. Jordan was 31 years old. She lived in Austin, Texas, and had built her entire brand around pushing limits. Her feed was a highlight reel of ice baths, ultramarathons, and motivational captions. Her bio read, "I don't do comfort zones." She had completed 2 guided treks to Everest Base Camp in previous years, once in 2016 and once in 2018, and had summited Kilimanjaro in Tanzania and Island Peak in Nepal. Both were non-technical climbs. Neither required crampons above a moderate grade or experience with fixed-line ascents in the death zone. But her application to Summit Horizon Expeditions, a mid-tier Nepali guiding company operating out of Kathmandu, listed those climbs prominently. The company accepted her, took her $58,000 deposit, and assigned her a 2 Sherpa team. Nima Charing was 47 years old and had guided the South Col route on Everest 19 times. He had turned back clients before. He had no problem doing it again. When he met Jordan at base camp at 17,600 feet, he shook her hand and looked at her gear. Everything was right. The boots were good. The down suit was a Rab Neutrino, rated to -40. When the supplemental oxygen system was a standard Poisk regulator with 2 bottles per carry. She had done the gear right. What she had not done right was the preparation. Nima noticed it during the first acclimatization rotation to Camp 2 at 21,300 feet. Jordan moved too fast on the ascent, pushed past the rest points, and spent the overnight rotation filming content instead of sleeping. She posted 3 videos from her sleeping bag at Camp 2 at 2 o'clock in the morning, altitude 21,300 feet, with a caption that read, "No sleep, no summit. Just kidding. The summit is tomorrow." It was not tomorrow, but the mindset was already set. She was the loudest person at base camp, said Rowan Fletcher, a British climber also attempting the South Col route that season. Always laughing, always filming. You wanted to like her, most people did. Yeah, that's what makes it so hard to talk about. The second Sherpa assigned to Jordan was Dawa Furba, 34 years old, 9 Everest summits, sharp eyes, and very few words. On May 6th, four days before the summit push, Dawa Furba sat outside the mess tent at base camp and watched the jet stream through a small weather app on his phone. He showed the forecast to Nima Charing. The weather window that Summit Horizon had scheduled for the May 10th was closing earlier than planned. A low-pressure system was tracking faster than the models had predicted 72 hours before. The window would likely be viable only until early afternoon on May 10th, not the standard departure to summit window of 14 to 16 hours that the South Col route typically required for a client at Jordan's experience level, Dawa Furba told the lead guide told Summit Horizon's operations manager in Kathmandu. The operations manager said to proceed and monitor. Nima Charing went to Jordan's tent that evening. He sat across from her on a folding stool and spoke clearly. He told her the window was shorter than expected. He told her that given her pace from the acclimatization rotations, he was not confident she could summit and descend before conditions turned. He recommended they delay and attempt a second window later in the season if one opened. Jordan listened, she nodded. Then she opened her phone and showed him her sponsorship agreement. She had a content delivery deadline with a sportswear brand. She had a flight home on May 14th. She had 3 brand partners waiting on summit footage. "I hear you," she told him. But I didn't come all this way to go home with nothing. Nima Charing would later tell investigators, I told her directly. I said, the mountain will not wait for your schedule. She smiled and said she understood the risks. I've heard that before, many times. But something felt different with her. She was not listening to me. She was already thinking about what she would say to the camera. On the morning of May 9th, the full team departed base camp for Camp 2. The prayer flags at the puja altar snapped and cracked in a cold crosswind, their frayed edges a blur of red and blue and white. The smell of juniper smoke from the morning offering still hung in the cold air. Jordan filmed the altar as she passed it and posted the clip with the caption, Blessed and ready. She was moving fast, too fast. And Nima Charing watched her pull ahead on the trail and felt the same weight in his chest he had felt once before, in 2012, with a client who did not come home. He adjusted his pack straps, said nothing, and followed her up the Khumbu icefall into the dark. By the time they reached Camp 3 at 23,500 feet the following evening, Dawa Furba had already checked the weather twice. The low-pressure system had accelerated again. He radioed base camp at 7:14 p.m. His voice was flat and steady. Window closes by noon tomorrow, he said. Maybe earlier. Base camp acknowledged. Nobody called Jordan. She was already asleep, phone in her hand, a half-written caption on her screen. Camp 3, 23,500 feet. Most people will never know what this feels like. She was right about that, but not in the way she meant. They left Camp 4 at 11:47 p.m. on May 10th. Meet the South Col at 26,000 feet was a flat gray wasteland of loose shale and ice, and the wind was already stronger than the forecast had promised. Jordan moved well at first. The supplemental oxygen was flowing at 2 liters per minute through her Poisk mask, and the regulated flow kept her head clear enough to keep her feet moving in a steady rhythm up the fixed lines toward the balcony at 27,600 feet. Nima Charing was clipped in directly behind her. Dawa Furba was 30 meters above, breaking trail. The headlamps of 3 other climbing teams dotted the ridge above them like slow-moving stars. For the first 2 hours, everything felt controlled. Then, at approximately 1:20 a.m., the wind shifted. It came from the northwest without warning, a hard lateral gust that hit Jordan sideways and knocked her into the fixed line. She grabbed it, held, and kept moving. But Nima Charing felt it differently. He had stood on this ridge 19 times. He knew the difference between summit wind and weather wind. He called up to Dawa Furba in Nepali. Dawa Furba stopped, looked at his altimeter watch, and looked at the sky. Then he looked back down at Nima. Neither man said a word. They did not need to. Nima came up beside Jordan and told her they needed to reassess. The wind was changing character. The barometric pressure on his watch had dropped 4 millibars in the last 40 minutes. That was not a small number at this altitude. Jordan pulled her oxygen mask down and looked at him. Her face was red from the cold, and her eyes were bright and wide. We are 4 hours from the summit, she said. Oh, I am not turning around. I told her we were outside the safe window, Nima Charing told investigators later. She looked at me and said, you can go back if you want. I could not leave her. I could not leave a client on the mountain alone. They kept climbing. By 3:40 a.m., they had reached the balcony at 27,600 feet. The wind was now a sustained 55 miles per hour with gusts pushing higher. The temperature without wind chill was negative 35 degrees Celsius. With wind chill, it was beyond the range of the instruments they carried. Jordan's GoPro was still recording. She held it up and said, balcony, 27,600 feet. We are doing this. Her voice was muffled behind the mask, but the words were clear. It was the last clear sentence she would speak for the rest of the night. 20 minutes past the balcony, the visibility dropped. It did not drop gradually. It dropped the way a curtain falls, sudden and complete. One moment, Nima could see Dawa Furba's headlamp 25 meters ahead. The next moment, there was nothing but white. The spindrift came horizontal, fine as powder, filling every gap in their clothing and coating every lens and surface. Jordan reached for the fixed line with her right hand and missed it. She reached again and found it. But in that moment of searching, she had stepped 2 meters left of the route. On the southeast ridge at 27,800 feet, 2 meters in the wrong direction is not a small mistake. Nima grabbed her arm and pulled her back, but now he was not certain of the route himself. The fixed lines on Everest are anchored with pickets and deadman stakes driven into the snow and ice, and in full whiteout conditions, they become the only thread connecting a climber to the path home. Nima reached forward with his ice axe, felt the line, and clipped Jordan to it. He then reached for his radio. The radio did not respond. He pressed the transmit button 3 times. Static. He checked the battery indicator. The cold had dropped the battery to critical in under 2 hours. He had a spare battery in his pack, but in 55 mile per hour wind at negative 35 degrees, removing his gloves to access the battery compartment meant exposing bare skin to the air. He tried anyway. His fingers found the zipper of his outer pack, but the fine motor control was all ready when he could feel the zipper but could not grip it with enough precision to open it. He pulled his outer glove back on before the fingers could damage. No radio. No visibility. No way to call base camp. Jordan was standing still in the fixed line, face forward, not moving. Nama looked at her. Her legs were planted and her posture was upright, but she was not moving her feet. He came close and shouted into her hood. She turned. Her eyes were unfocused. The hypoxia at 27,800 feet, without adequate rest, and in extreme cold does not announce itself politely. It begins as a slowness, a heaviness behind the eyes, a feeling like the thoughts are moving through cold water. Jordan had been on supplemental oxygen, but her regulator had been set to 2 liters per minute for the lower section of the climb. At this altitude, in this cold, with this exertion, 2 liters was not enough. Nima checked her regulator and moved it to 3 liters. She blinked. She seemed to sharpen slightly. But the window for clear thinking at this altitude is not generous. Then her oxygen bottle ran empty. The gauge on the Poisk regulator dropped to 0. They were at 27,800 feet, with no visibility, no radio, 1 empty oxygen bottle, and 1 remaining bottle that Nima had planned to use during the descent. He switched her to the second bottle immediately. That gave her 1 bottle remaining at 3 liters per minute. At that flow rate, in these conditions, she had perhaps 90 minutes of oxygen left. Dawafurba was gone. He had been ahead of them in the whiteout and had either continued upward, not knowing they had stopped, or had turned back and passed them without contact. They would not know until later. In the investigation records, the Dawafurba's account stated that he had turned back at approximately the same time the visibility dropped and had descended to Camp 4, believing Nima and Jordan were directly behind him. He did not know they were not until he arrived at camp alone. Jordan began moving again on the fixed line, but she was moving upward, not down. Nima tried to turn her. She pulled against him. "Summit," she said, the word coming out thick and slow behind the mask. "Summit." Nima was a large man. He had the physical strength to hold her, but holding a client on a fixed line at 27,800 feet in a 55 mile per hour wind while managing his own balance and oxygen is not a simple physical problem. He held her for 40 seconds. She stopped pulling. She stood still. Then she sat down on the ice. That was when the shivering stopped. Violent shivering is the body's last active defense against the cold. When it stops, it does not mean the person is warm. It means the body has given up trying. Nima Charing had seen it once before, in a client on Cho Oyu in 2015. He knew exactly what it meant. He knelt beside Jordan and grabbed both her arms. Her head rolled toward him, her eyes were half closed. Her breathing was audible even over the wind, a slow, thick sound like breathing through a wet cloth. "Jordan," he shouted. "Jordan, look at me." She looked at him. Her lips moved. No sound came out. He got her upright. He clipped her harness to his with a short sling and began moving down the fixed line, pulling her weight with him, step by step, down the southeast ridge of Everest, in a complete whiteout at 27,800 feet, alone, with a nearly empty oxygen bottle and a woman who could no longer control her own feet. The guide radioed base camp at 5:09 a.m., according to Summit Horizon's communication logs. The message was broken and partially inaudible. Base camp operators transcribed the fragment as EE, north side of balcony. "She is down. Cannot weather." The rest was static. They tried to raise Nima Charing 4 more times in the following hour. He did not respond. The battery was dead. Jordan Kessler's GPS beacon, which she had activated before leaving Camp 4, recorded her last position at 5:22 a.m. at an elevation of 27,640 feet. After that, the beacon went silent. The signal simply stopped. At base camp, they stared at the screen and waited. Outside, the mountain was invisible behind cloud, somewhere above 27,000 feet in the dark and the wind and the cold. A GoPro camera was still recording. Nima Sharing did not stop moving for 4 hours. He descended approximately 680 vertical meters with Jordan clipped to him before his legs gave out at 26,400 feet. He had no memory of the last 200 meters. His brain, running on near empty oxygen, had kept his body moving on muscle memory, while conscious thought slipped away. When the rescue team found them at 9:47 a.m., Nima was sitting in the snow with Jordan's head in his lap, still clipped to her, rocking slightly, eyes open but not tracking. He had removed one outer mitten at some point. His right hand was the color of gray candle wax. Jordan Kessler was alive. Pulse, 38 beats per minute. Core temperature, 28.4 degrees Celsius. Severe hypothermia begins below 32. Below 28, the heart can stop from a tremor or a jolt. The medic, Dr. Sanjay Rai, 11 seasons at base camp, took the temperature twice before he started moving faster. The rescue team was 4 people. Dr. Rai, 2 senior Sherpa guides with technical rescue training, and Western coordinator Ben Hartley. They had climbed through darkness and worsening weather since 6:30 a.m., reaching the victims 52 minutes after arriving at Camp 4 by following footprints in a brief clearing of spindrift. Dr. Rai couldn't move Jordan immediately. At this altitude, moving a hypothermia patient carelessly can trigger ventricular fibrillation, almost always fatal without a working defibrillator. He warmed her first. Heat packs in her armpits, groin, and neck. Fresh oxygen at 4 liters per minute. An insulated bivouac bag sealed around her. Her blood oxygen saturation read 41%. Below 60, organ damage begins. At 41, the brain is starving. The helicopter request was logged at 10:11 a.m. The answer came back at 10:24. Wind at the South Col was 48 miles per hour. Flight was impossible. Captain Roshan Thapa, veteran of 23 high-altitude rescues, said, "I wanted to go, but the wind would have flipped us. I would have been adding to the rescue list." Ground evacuation from 26,400 feet takes 14 to 18 hours in good conditions. These were not good conditions. Mingma Gyalje and Tenzin Norbu rigged an improvised sled from climbing rope and a folded tent platform. They began moving at 10:41 a.m. Jordan's pulse stopped at 10:53. Dr. Rai performed compressions. Thick gloves, moving surface, wind chill of -50. Altitude depleting his own oxygen. 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Her pulse returned. Faint, irregular, 22 beats per minute. But there. "We got her back," Tenzin Norbu radioed base camp. "She is breathing, moving now." They descended methodically. Dr. Rai monitored Jordan's pulse manually at her neck every 90 seconds because the oximeter had frozen. Nima Sharing, his right hand wrapped in emergency dressings, walked behind them on his own feet. Nobody argued with him about it. The helicopter attempted a second approach at 1:45 p.m. Captain Thapa came within 200 meters before a 62-mile-per-hour crosswind forced him to abort. "Closer is not landed," he said. Jordan's pulse stopped again at 2:11 p.m. Dr. Rai brought her back a second time. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. Her pupils, when he checked them, were slow to react. Not absent, slow. He knew what slow meant. The sled reached Camp 2 at 6:48 p.m. when they carried her into a tent and began aggressive rewarming. IV line, continuous oxygen, heat packs replaced every 20 minutes. Outside, Rowan Fletcher sat listening to Dr. Rai talk to her in a low, steady voice. At 8:30 p.m., base camp received the call. Core temperature, 31.2 degrees, pulse 44, and holding. The first number that had moved in the right direction in 10 hours. Nobody spoke. The next 12 hours would determine everything. Jordan Kessler died at 4:17 a.m. on May 12, 2019, at Camp 2 on Mount Everest. Elevation 21,300 feet. Her core temperature had climbed to 31.8 degrees before her heart went into ventricular fibrillation at 3:54 a.m. Dr. Rai and 2 medics worked for 23 minutes. The defibrillator delivered 2 shocks. Neither worked. The medical examiner listed the cause of death as severe hypothermia with secondary cardiac arrest, compounded by high-altitude cerebral hypoxia and frostbite. The Nepal Mountaineering Association entered it as a preventable fatality. The negligence reveal came 6 weeks later. Summit Horizon Expeditions had received 3 progressively urgent weather advisories, warning that the summit window would close by mid-morning on May 10th. None were communicated to the climbing team. The operations manager approved the summit push anyway. The investigation panel found that Summit Horizon's commercial incentive to maintain their summit rate had directly influenced the decision to withhold the forecast. They had also assigned a 1-to-2 Sherpa to client ratio, instead of the standard 1-to-1, by leaving Nima Charing without options when conditions turned. Someone knew the window was closing. Someone chose not to say so. Jordan had invested 14 months of training and $58,000. She had 2.4 million followers and 3 sponsors waiting on summit footage. The mountain treated none of that as relevant. Her last GPS coordinates placed her at 27,640 feet, 410 meters below the summit. The GoPro footage recovered with her equipment has never been publicly released. Those who watched it said the final 38 minutes were quiet. She is moving, then she is not moving, then she is still. The camera keeps recording until the battery dies. Nima Charing said it plainly. We told her the mountain would not wait. We told her on the mountain that the time was gone. We already knew how it ended. They were right. Nobody listened.